here we are.
At home.
Even in our living rooms.
At our kitchen tables.
Today, wherever you are,
know that you are not alone.
You are not alone.
Today we gather as one body.
One body.
Because the church is not a building.
It never has been.
God's kingdom is universal.
Gather as one online today.
To light up one name.
The name of Jesus.
Jesus.
So wherever you are,
let's praise his name.
Today.
Every day.
He is so worthy of our time.
Let's focus on his ways.
Great to see familiar and young, bright faces this morning. A good way to start our morning together. Thank you for tuning in with us this week. There's Tyler, Director of Youth Ministries, and I'm Leah, Director of Children's Ministry. We're married and we both work at Oxford Church of the Nazarene. We are glad that you're with us this morning. We're filming from our screen room to have an authentic effect. It is pitter-pattering in the background, and you'll see why in a few minutes as we take a look at Noah and his family.
Coming off of 8 or 9 weeks of quarantine. Who's keeping count anymore? I don't know. I'm not. I've seen some jokes online about people getting tans from their fridge lights. Can't help but notice the other day that our fridge light burnt out. It's no longer working. So there's no tans happening here at the Hobbs household. It's just dark in the fridge because it's been overused. So if you're overusing, don't feel bad. You're amongst friends here this morning.
Indeed.
Speaking of quarantine, this isn't the first time I've been in a situation like this with my military career. I was confined to barracks with about 40 other gentlemen. Gentlemen is the term I'll use.
It's generous.
For about 4 months. And it was rough, a lot rougher, actually, than what's happening here with my lovely wife and our 3 children. And there were some things that we did with, for, and to each other that were probably not good things to do in a confined space where you're forced to live together. But hopefully this morning, through our look at Noah in the Bible, we have a few better tips and better things to consider that maybe me and the boys wish we had known way back when.
Here's a look at the story of Noah from Children's Bible. So family friendly. Bring your kids. If you don't already have your kids with you, grab your whole family and come and sit down to finish watching what we have for you.
God told Noah, "Make yourself an ark. Bring male and female of every living thing into the ark. Take food for you and for them. Store it away." Noah did everything exactly as God commanded. Noah and his family entered the ark. Rain fell and the waters rose. The ark floated on the water. Every living thing on the earth was wiped out. Only Noah and those who were left with him on the ark were left. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days, but God showed concern for Noah and all the animals in the ark. God sent a wind over the earth, and the water began to go down. The ark came to rest on the mountains. After 40 days, Noah opened the window. Noah sent a raven out. It kept flying back and forth. Noah sent a dove out. The dove couldn't find any place to put its feet down, so it returned to Noah. Noah waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again. The dove returned to him. There in its beak was a fresh olive leaf. Noah waited 7 more days. He sent the dove out again, but that time it didn't return to him. Noah and his family came out of the ark. All of the animals came out of the ark. So did the birds. God said, I'll never destroy all living things again. As long as the earth lasts, there always be a time to plant and time to gather crops. There will always be a cold and heat. There will always be summer and winter and day and night. I have put my rainbow in the clouds. It will be a sign of my connect between me and the earth.
Keep in mind, not just 40 days and nights. I know when I think of the story of Noah's Ark, I think 40 days, 40 nights, a month and a bit, not such a big deal. However, it wasn't just 40 days and 40 nights. They had to wait 5 months until the water receded enough to even land on a mountain, and then a few more months of waiting. 10.5 months before they could open the door of the ark, and then another couple months of waiting for the land to dry enough to leave the ark. So in total, Noah and his family were on the ark for 12.5 months. Now this is a really confined space. This is like a floating barn for a year and a bit.
A lot of people, they just think, they read remember the Sunday school sermons and classes, and they read the children's Bible and they think, oh, it was 40 days and 40 nights. Well, that was just the rain. Most people don't realize that it was a year and 20 days that they were confined together.
Yeah. So you can just imagine the smells, the sounds, the fighting, whatever may have happened, whatever is happening in your home, multiply that by not being able to even go outside, any of those things. They were in this boat for 12 months. There's a lot of parallels to the story in Noah's Ark. The reason they were in the ark was so they could be safe. So that they could be safe. There was something terrible going on beyond their understanding, but they had been told if they were in the ark, they would be safe. And so that's what they did. And we can relate to that on a lot of levels. Even just beyond the quarantine, but doing things so that we can be safe.
Noah's governing body at the time said, go in the ark and stay there. Our governing body has told us to go home and stay there.
Yeah.
Definitely pretty easy line to draw.
Another parallel is who he was with. He was with his family. He had his wife with him. He had his 3 sons and their 3 wives, because they were all older in years. So they were a family unit with the 8 of them. So there was 8 of them in this ark, plus 2 animals of every kind, and then a few extras for the animals that would have been sacrificed, and birds. There was extra birds on the ark. So I'm not entirely sure why. I'm sure somebody knows, but I don't know at this point. But there they were, their family and all these animals confined in the ark.
Now, keep in mind, as tough as we've got it here with our 3 kids, and as tough as you may have it with your children, or perhaps even a grandparent, imagine for a moment if you were one of Noah's sons' wives. You would have to spend more than a year quarantined with your in-laws. Something to think about, and maybe send a little love Noah's way and their way.
And they had limited options. There was no Netflix. There was no Wi-Fi. There was no drive-thrus to go to. No going for drives. Like, their options were quite limited.
Yeah, and if you wanted to go for a walk, nowadays you can go up the street or even drive somewhere and hike a trail. Not happening on the boat.
No.
There's only so much walking space, and you would have examined every peg along the way many times over.
Yeah. And it was another parallel is the waiting game. They were waiting for a date they didn't know of. They were told what to do, they were doing what they had to do, and then they were just waiting for the rain to stop, the waters to go down so that they could leave the ark and start this fresh life that God had promised them. But they were waiting. They didn't have answers, and you can just imagine the monotony of being on this ark day after day together, doing the same things over and over and over while you're waiting for a signal that you can actually leave. Now, I know we were actually just talking about it in our staff meeting this week. The monotony is real, that the tiredness that comes from monotony. And it's not a tiredness because necessarily we're doing so much. It's just the waiting, the unknown, and the mundane that gets to you after a while. So we get that, and in Noah's situation, they would have felt it very keenly, I think.
Absolutely. There would have been, like Leah just said, it's one thing to be tired, but it's another thing to be tired of all the things you're doing. It's like two layers that they would have experienced that we are now experiencing.
So how did they get through? We asked some kids the question of, what do you think, if Noah made rules for the ark, what do you think they were? So here's some of the answers we got. No roaring past midnight.
That's important.
That would be important.
Need your sleep.
No eating bananas past lunch. I don't know what the rationale there is, but...
Don't want to wreck your supper, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Or, after lunch is a good nap time. Don't want to make other animals jealous.
No eating each other. So that's an important rule. There was no eating each other.
That's a rough one. That would have been a rough one for the tigers, I think.
Stay on your floor. I'm not exactly sure the design of the ark.
Three levels. Three tiers.
3 levels, okay. So the kids thought maybe if they all stayed on their floor, it would make it more organized and orderly.
Yeah. Well, and you wouldn't have to hunt them down to feed them or milk them or... I mean, each animal had their own food, I guess, so you had to find where they were so you could actually feed that critter.
Yeah. And the last rule that they think Noah would have had was, listen to us. So that would be important.
That would be important.
Yeah.
Especially for the beavers. Noah's ark was made of wood, so they would have to obey.
So kidding aside, how did they get through? I think there's at least 3 things that they really would have had to do in order to get through that experience well, which it seems like they did. First and foremost, they honored God.
So important.
And that they sacrificed right away when they got out of the ark. They sacrificed to God as like a thanks and an offering to Him, which to me suggests that they had a relationship with God right through that year because they still fondly thought of Him and respected Him to honor Him with the sacrifice.
Well, that suggests that particular thing to Leah. I would agree that they would have kept their relationship with God nice and strong. In order to think that, we got to sacrifice now and thank God for safe passage. One thing my mind drifts to is, what critter do we not have today that was more annoying than a chihuahua? Okay? They picked something and sacrificed it the moment they got off the boat. And it wasn't the chihuahua because we got chihuahuas. So it was something that was more annoying than the chihuahua.
I don't think that's exactly how it was. The other thing to get through was they had to be diligent in their tasks. They had to always keep up with the work that was there because they had all these animals to care for. They had to be diligent every day in the tasks that they had. So that was the scraping, the feeding, the brushing, the whatever that would have looked like. They had to be diligent to what they were doing. They couldn't just laze back, get their peanuts and just sit there watching Netflix. They couldn't do that.
No, and gentlemen, I know you feel it. There's the honey-do list that you have been having to get to now for 8 weeks. And we're starting to look like quarantine's ending, and some of us are wondering, well, if this is coming to an end real soon, I haven't done all those things that I thought I might like to get done now that quarantine's happening. So, TikTok, gentlemen.
No, it is okay to have some rest and balance too. But they also they must have had to respect each other, highly respect each other, in order to still stay, because they stayed together for a while after they left the ark. They were still together long enough for the vine branches to grow and produce grapes, because there's a story with that involved in it. So they didn't just get off the ark and like run and flee.
That's right. But keep in mind, there's a difference between respect and like. And I only bring that up because I noticed in my reading of this story that the Bible doesn't mention any children being born for about 2 years after the ark lands. Okay, so they may have had some things to work on after a year in the boat, because it took 2 years before the first kid was born.
Okay. With relationships, though, with anything, there is so much that is out of our control. This situation, so much is out of our control. We think we're in control, or maybe we want to be in control a lot more than we are, but we're not always. We can't control what's going on with this COVID, and we can't control when it's going to end. But there are certain things that we can control.
And of the things that we can, I mean, you look outside and some of us are looking out and we're wondering, how often is our neighbor going out and what are they doing? Why do they have to go out every day? So that's not in our control. But wondering things like that, it's going to clog up your noggin a little bit. Other things not in our control is spring weather. It's Nova Scotia, and when quarantine first came, I remember it was sunny almost every day and we were all stuck inside, and now lately some restrictions have been easing and it's been raining and snowing. So there are a lot of things we can't control, and it's important that we make a line between them and realize our limits and realize and firmly put the things we can't control in their own camp and leave them there, and not try to drag them back into the camp of the things that we can't control.
Very true. Yeah. And I think in the camp of the things that we can control, it involves a lot of the relationship, like that respect that they would have had for each other. They would have had to have a lot of control over their reactions to each other. They would have always had to check that they were responding well to each other, responding in kindness, keeping their tone good with each other. They would have always had to keep that in check, just like we do.
At the start, it may not have been easy, because you're used to going away if you need some space. So at the start, they may have said the same type of words in the same type of way and realized, hey, I've got nowhere to go now that I've said these words this way. So at the start, probably a lot like some of us, things were rocky, I'm betting. Things were really rocky. But with time, you kind of come to grips with the things you should be saying and the things you shouldn't be saying, and realizing that, the impact of my words in quarantine or in isolation, it seems a lot bigger. And so we got to really put effort into the words we're saying to each other.
Yeah. And choosing to put somebody else's interests above our own sometimes for the course of the day. I know there was actually a shift for us when I started thinking in the day of what can I actually do for Tyler to help his day go better today. And I think that's something in our homes with our kids, with everybody. How can we be putting what they need up in the forefront of what's happening?
And you feel better. You do. Instead of wondering what I'm going to do next, or trying to plan my day around things I have to do, and then by the end of the day still feeling tired and maybe a little bit defeated anyway, it kind of puts you in a better mind state if you're thinking, well, how can I make so-and-so's day better? And then you go to bed at the end of the day and you feel kind of good. Even though you didn't get all your stuff done, you do end up feeling a lot better, knowing that, I made their day better.
Mm-hmm. And another thing we can control is what we spend our time thinking about, where we let our thoughts go. That's a really important thing for what we can control, because we can control if we're going to keep our thoughts full of gratitude, on the positive, if we're going to fill our thoughts with beautiful, good things that are around us, if we're going to focus on the negative, if we're going to focus on all the bad things, or if we're going to focus on dirty, nasty things in this time. That will really affect how we treat each other, and that will really affect our state of moving through this.
100%. And being mindful of the content you're taking in, teens.
Yeah.
If you're taking in a lot of junk, then you're going to feel it.
Yeah.
And often that junk's going to come back up because you've seen it on YouTube, you've seen it on TikTok, and you're going to realize that sometimes those same things that you saw that you thought were kind of junky are now starting to come out. So we've got to be careful, especially the teens and even all of us, you know. From time to time, we're tempted to watch or look at something we know that we probably shouldn't, that's not going to help us be better people. It's going to come out again. Or it's just going to fester. So we got to be really careful. Like I said, especially in quarantine, these types of actions seem to have a bigger impact than they would normally.
And we notice in our house, for all of us, if we're pumping like really good music, positive, uplifting music with a good beat or whatever, we usually feel better, and it usually changes the atmosphere in our home enough so that we're thinking more positively, we're thinking better thoughts. So music, all of it is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially if you play music. Make sure you get back to that if you haven't been.
Another thing in our control is how we fill our time. So, I mean, we're kind of a little bit responsible of how we, you know, how long we sleep in the morning, what time we go to bed, all of those things. We kind of have a bit of control of that. So how are we maximizing it? What are we making a priority? Are we making God a priority? Are we making our kids a priority? Are we making whatever? However we prioritize our time is going to make a difference.
Like I said earlier, you know, with some restrictions easing, this may come to an end soon. It may not, you know. There's a whole talk of the second wave, and we'll put all that aside. But just think about the list you were set when this whole thing started, and, you know, it'll help you feel better to get some of those done. Fill in your time.
Now, with all that said, I think it's important to mention, because we know there are dynamics in certain homes that are not healthy right now. This is a lot of stress, this is overwhelming, and there can be some unhealthy things coming up that are a little bit out of your control. And just so you know, there are a lot of counselors that are still doing their sessions on video calls. I know Focus on the Family has a free consultation with a counselor if you phone into their hotline, and you can spend time talking with a counselor. And
it's just a phone number. You just call it. It doesn't get any easier than that. If you feel like you could use someone to talk to.
And something I found, and hopefully this will be helpful for somebody this week, this is from the Thriving Family magazine, from Focus on the Family. But if there's an unhealthy relationship in your house, sometimes it's easy to think it might all be the other person. And in some cases it might be a lot the other person, but this is coming from the experience of somebody in a really bad situation with their spouse. She says, if you're convinced that your spouse is both the problem and solution to your marriage struggles, you've given him or her all the power. Changing toxic patterns in a chronically troubled marriage isn't easy, and it takes time. It may eventually require changes on the part of both spouses, but that's not the place where healing usually begins. It begins with one. And then she also had said before that once she had changed, he had to change as well, because she wasn't responding the same or acting the same way anymore. And so sometimes we think those things are totally out of our control, in that space of out of control, but there are small steps we can be taking to put things in our control and being the kind of person that we want the other person to be as well. So that's just kind of a little side note, because we know there can be some tension and some stress that happens in times like this. Anytime, but times like this especially.
100%. That works with married couples, that works with teenagers. You know, with us and our teen, we're half the equation. Leah and I married, we're each half the equation. So if she changes how she's working, or I change how I work, the other party is forced to change as well, because you're no longer responding the same way. You're no longer acting the same way, and they can no longer react the same way. Teenagers, spouses, this works on many levels. So when we were thinking about what message to give this morning, we thought Noah was a pretty good example, for all the obvious reasons and for one not so obvious reason. He is mentioned again in Hebrews, in the Hall of Faith. He's honored there because of all the great things that he did and how he did them. So what is his example?
I think there's three kind of big things. His diligence, his whole family, but his diligence in the mundane, in the hard tasks. First building the boat, but then while they were on the boat, doing what they did with excellence and diligently. And then living in a way that built respect with each other. living in a way that honored each other so that they could still be family and friends afterwards. So he worked at living well with his family. And then the third thing is the surrendering and responding to God. It was all about surrendering and responding to God, and that way he didn't drown, literally. But surrendering and responding to God, and I think that same call is open to all of us now still. God is there just waiting to be acknowledged as the one true God, for us to surrender to him, because he is the one that is in control of everything. And he is the one that does have the answers. That's sometimes hard for us to imagine, but he's just so much bigger and grander than our minds can wrap around. And he's inviting us to have a relationship with him, to surrender to him, to trust in him, and move forward together. And that happens through Jesus. And Jesus was even a perfect example of surrender when he was in the garden praying, and he said, "Not my will, Father, but yours." Even Jesus, his son, surrendered. And then this beautiful thing happened where we could receive forgiveness and a right relationship with God through believing in Jesus. And that is open to all of us anytime. We don't have to be Noah. We don't have to be Noah's wife or kids. It's for all of us to enter into that relationship with God.
For that one, you don't even have to pick up a phone or make a phone call. You just close your eyes and pray. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, he invites us all to quiet our hearts before him, believe in him, acknowledge him as Lord and Savior and God, and then has promises lined up for us afterwards.
Amen.
Waiting for us. Just like he had promises lined up for Noah after they got out of the ark, there was promises lined up for his family, promises for the earth. That's the God that we serve. So hopefully you got a little taste of that today in this morning's message, and that you have something to walk away with and chew on this week and think about this week.
Let's pray. Lord, thank you for today. Thank you that we can gather like this. Thank you that you do have a will for us. And thank you that you love us. Continue to show us ways that we can do your will and that we can love others, those closest to us and those furthest from us. Go with us this week. Pray you would keep us safe, content, and healthy. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining us this morning, and God bless.